Okay, topic 3, multiplication and the division in algebra. When we write things in algebra, it's like mathematicians get a bit lazy and we often leave out our multiplication signs. What you need to know is that they are still there and they do still mean you have to do it, just only do it if you're substituting other numbers in. But I'll show you what that means. If I'm having to do this sort of operation here, like 5 times 4x, well, that means 5 times the 4x. So hopefully you can do 5 times 4. If not, grab a calculator, punch it in, and you'd find that the answer would be 20x. So whatever it was, it has now become 20 x's. You never want 20 x's. So let's keep going. Let's try a few others. This one has worked because we have a number at the front without any letter and then only one. But what if we've got two different ones, like in the one next to it? Well, I'm still going to times the numbers together, but I'm also going to times the letters together. And when we do that, it looks a bit like this. So my two numbers together, 6 times 4 in my calculator, is 24. And the x and the y, well, they times together and it looks a bit like this. There's my 24, there's my x, and there's my y. And so I just write 24 x times y. Except I've left all the multiplyings out, or the timeses out, but I know they're still there. I can just write it simpler as 24xy. All the mathematicians around the world speak the same language, so if you write it like this, we're all talking the same language. Let's try some others. Maybe we've got one like this, where it's 5ab times minus 4ba. Well, you might remember from a previous video that BA is the same as AB, so they're compatible and they can work together. And I'll do the same thing with my 5 and minus 4 in front and times them together. So let's see what happens. Grabbed a calculator, I put in 5 times minus 4 out in front, and I got minus 20. And then the rest of it, well, a times b, and b times b, and a times a, well, that's going to be a squared and b squared. That's the b times b and the a times a. It's just a shorter way of writing it. So I'm using my squareds and my cubes, if it's a 3, or maybe a 4, to write it easier. It's easier to write that than to write out minus 20 times a times a bracket times b times b bracket. You can see it gets a bit hard. So it's easy to just write a squared times b squared. And we know that they're all times together at the end. Let's come down to some divisions. Well, these ones can be a bit tricky, but it's okay, we'll guide you through it. If we have an x on one side and an x on the other, guess what? They cancel out and become the number 1. 1 is important because whenever we times anything by the number 1, it is just itself. What that means is, like this one here, if I have 16y divided by 6y, well, that means I do my 18 divided by 6 on the calculator, and I'd get 3. And that's going to be 3 times whatever y divided by y is. So if y is divided by y, anything divided by itself is 1. So 3 times 1 is 3. And so that's just the answer, is 3. So we can use this division, as in something divided by itself, to cancel it out. essentially we're just taking them out. Let's try some trickier ones. Scrolling down, maybe you get down to some others where they don't all work nicely together. That does happen, and it's important not to freak out and to just give it a go. Let's have a crack at this one. 16xy times 5x divided by y. Well, I'm going to use my bed mass here. There's no brackets, but I'm going to do my multiplying first. So I'm going to do 16 times x times y times 5 times x. I'll do that first. 16 times 5 is 80 times x squared, because x times x, and then that's going to be times y at the end. That's the first step, and this part of that's what that part of the equation is. The second part, and see how I'm breaking this into steps to show my working out, is going to be to divide all of that by the 8y. And I'm just using some brackets here to show that. And so I can do the 8 and the 80. So that's like 10. 8 divided by 80 in my calculator got me 10. X squared, well, nothing's happening with that because nothing's compatible with it. So that stays as x squared. But y divided by y, well, that's going to be 1 again. So they cancel out. So I'd leave it as 10x squared. Hope this helps, and happy practicing.